Dudley is he is the most well-respected and well-known and important figure in rural arts theater I think in the United States right now. He has been the artistic director for Roadside Theater for, what, 35 years, Dudley?
Yeah, just about 3 decades.
Yeah, okay. And also very involved in nationally in arts activist areas. He's on a board member for Imagining America, as well as being a consultant for doesn't seem as if there's a study that comes out that doesn't touch on theater or rural arts that hasn't consulted Dudley. So we're really very fortunate to have him here. I'm hoping that they're paying attention enough to be able to just go around and introduce the students as well. And if you would, when I get to you, if you would just wave so that it's kind of hard to see who's speaking sometimes. So we'll start here with Alwyn.
Okay. I don't know. Hi, I'm Alwyn.
I'm Jacob.
So, Alan, could you tell me where you're from?
Okay, yeah, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm a junior. I'm a drama major.
Okay, thanks.
I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
What's your name?
Jacob. I'm Jacob. I'm from Winston-Salem, and I'm a drama major as well.
And you're a theater licensure.
Yeah, I'm getting my teaching licensure, so I'll hopefully be teaching high school.
I'm Rosemary. I'm from Winston-Salem as well, also a drama major.
So original.
Hi, I'm Kay. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm a psychology major.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm a senior and I'm a drama major with a management minor, and I'm from Charlotte.
Hello, my name's Katie, and I am a drama major, junior from Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm a senior, and I am a lighting design major from Charlotte.
And that is all of us.
Well, everybody's from the city.
Yep. That seems to be where UNC Asheville does a lot of its recruiting.
Yeah. Anybody interested in moving to a rural place?
Sure. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably.
So, so Dudley, let me sort of prime the pump a little bit with some questions, and then we'll have more of a conversation. But maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about your personal and educational background. Did you find that the theater education that you got prepared you for the kind of work that you were going to do for the last 35 years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question just because I got no formal education in theater. So I barely, growing up, maybe I saw 2 or 3 outdoor dramas, the big outdoor spectacles around the settling of Jamestown or some remarkable Civil War, something or another. So I didn't grow up with theater at all. And in my school, they didn't even have theater or the arts. So I didn't get interested in theater until I was 29 years old. So prior to then, I was I was always interested in writing. I was an English major and a creative writer, but I'd never thought at all about theater. And what was married to my creative writing was a whole history of activism. I started becoming a political activist probably the day that Medgar Evers was murdered. And I was 17 years old. And so that got me started with in earnest with the civil rights movement. And then from there into the anti-Vietnam War movement. So my sort of arc there through late teens through my 20s was as a political activist and writer. And then a friend asked me to come help him write a play. And I said, sure. He wanted me to help him because I had this background in writing. So we wrote the play, which was had a lot of research in it. So we wrote the play, and I just figured, well, that's it. And lo and behold, I discovered plays are nothing unless they're produced. And so that's when I started working to form Roadside Theater, really to produce this play that we had written.
Ah, what was the play?
It was a play called Red Fox Second Hanging,
which was a very important production for Roadside Theater, and really it continues to be. I've got a video copy of one of the productions of that was broadcast, I believe.
Yeah, it's a funny story. It was a docudrama, and it was about a watershed moment here in eastern Kentucky, southwest Virginia, when King Cole, as we call him, stepped off the train. And that meant, and this is in the late 1880s, early 1890s, when King Cole arrived, which was really the coming of big business and capitalism, money, banks. This was one of the last, where I'm sitting here in the Appalachian Mountains, is one of the last pockets of the U.S. frontier. So capitalism, money, banks, law and order arrived very late. So this is a play about that watershed moment when that occurs. And as it turned out, there were two histories. There was the history that was being written by King Cole, and that history was basically that the people living here were backwards, stuck, didn't know what they were doing, just ignorant. And then the people's history was, here comes King Cole, and suddenly our natural way of life is threatened. So people were living on the frontier very intentionally. It was it was an odd mix, maybe not so odd. It was Cherokee from down around where you all are in the valleys between here and the mountains of Asheville. It was the Cherokee who had fled up into these mountains to escape the death march to Oklahoma, the Trail of Tears, and Scots-Irish who had moved away from the coast to get away from the English. So that's who was here beginning in the 1700s. And of course, intermarriage and so forth was immediate. So it was kind of a rebellious group. And so suddenly in comes King Cole, and the whole way of life changes. And that's what the play is about.
So your background was in activism and in creative writing, and then you became involved in the producing of theater. Did you have to do a lot of sort of self-teaching as far as the history of what it was you were doing? And if so, who were some of your inspirations for the work that you've done, either contemporary or people from the past?
Yeah. So I didn't know anything. I was as as dumb about theater as a lump of coal. And so, yeah, I had to learn everything. We had no idea when we started the theater how to write a contract to get UNC Asheville to present us. We didn't know anything. So we just started it from scratch. But there's a lot of logic to it. If you just are focused on it, one thing will lead to another if you keep your wits about you, and you'll figure out what you need to know. So we pretty early on, I started in 75, and by a year and a half later, we'd formed an organization at Highlander Center called Alternate Routes. So that was a network of other people trying to make a new kind of grassroots theater. And so we helped each other. So I can remember, we would write away to somebody who knew more than us, send us a copy of your contracts so we can copy them, that kind of thing. So we sort of learned by the seat of our pants, but it really wasn't a bad way to learn. But then as we got a little further into it, we began to see that really what we were doing had happened before in other ways. And that's when we got in touch with the history of Robert Gard, and personally got in touch with him as well, the Carolina Playmakers at Chapel Hill. You would, to go to Chapel Hill in the last 30 years, as I've done on a number of occasions, you'd never know that Carolina Playmaker history because it's just not present in what they are today. But it was a wonderful history of really getting the Carolina stories onto the stage, and people like Paul Green, a playwright, won a Pulitzer Prize for this kind of work. So while this work that this sort of grassroots theater ensemble, new play creation now seems maybe a minority occupation, at one time it was the main thing happening in American theater, where now regional theaters dominate with whatever plays that are produced in many different regional venues around the country in any given year. It was much more eccentric, much more grounded in place at a time in the past. And the cheap point I often make is that it wasn't, it just wasn't a secondary alternative type of theater. It was the main theater.
Mm-hmm. Right. We, in the same chapter as your essay in An Ideal Theater, we've read an essay about the Federal Theater Project, and I know that I think you are a proponent of government funding and the idea that is the money of the people, and so should be distributed into things that people appreciate, such as the arts. But the other thing that we read is that the Federal Theater Project lasted 4 years and then was killed by Congress. And of course, the arts have been a kind of a political football since the 90s. So talk a little bit about that. Why should we see government funding as being something that will help us rather than make us more unstable?
Well, I think the WPA story does point out that the arts have always, people who care about power have always understood the power of the arts. The WPA was dismantled chiefly because it was attracting a huge audience across racial and class lines. So the WPA Federal Theater Project was really the culmination of a lot of effort that had begun in the 20s with Drummond at Cornell, then with Robert Gard, then with Frederick Koch at UNC, Chapel Hill, etc., Arvold out in North Dakota. So this was a populist theater. And what the people in power wanted to kill was populism. In some ways, they wanted to kill a populist democracy. So the Federal Theater Project, there were 2 hearings, both in the Senate and the House, the Dyes and Woodrum committees. The FBI investigated it. But I am pretty sure that the chief threat, though the plays could be insightful and took different perspectives, I think the chief threat was just this: they were becoming very, very popular, and people were really paying attention and learning and discussing them. So, that spells the end of the Federal Theater Project. Now, the story goes on. The archives for the project were lost for a number of years. And then Lorraine Brown found them. I guess she was at, one of the, I can't remember the university, but up in Northern Virginia. She found them in an airplane hangar in Maryland, brought them back to her university, and started curating them. And then, of course, people started going through their attics who'd been part of it and donating collections, and people were coming in and starting to make new plays. And then when Reagan came in, they took back the whole collection from the university where Lorraine had curated it, because, again, this material was starting to be used and for a sort of populist movement. So they took it back into the Library of Congress and cut it all up. So all the play scripts went into with all the other play scripts. In other words, it couldn't form a coherent narrative about a kind of a theater. So you spin forward, and when Reagan was elected, there was a clear mandate in his election. It was part of their de facto platform that they were going to dismantle both the NEA and the NEH. Then they were going to get rid of Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS, NPR. And then even some elements of the hard right were going to go into universities like UNC Asheville and get rid of maybe you. Any professor that didn't seem to be towing the line. Now, people hear this and they think, well, what in the world's Dudley saying? He's getting a little far-fetched here. But it's really not the case. It happened in the 50s. Some people say the University of Texas, Austin, never recovered from the purge during the Red Scare. So these things, though they might seem fantastic or not, so, I mean, this battle around art and culture continues, last week, New York Times, so forth and so on. Well, the point is that the art we have now, the nonprofit performing arts we have now, they can slice it and dice it any way they want, but all you've got to do is walk into a theater, and you can see that it's reaching a very narrow demographic of wealthy, better educated people. I mean, every survey says it's about the wealthiest 15% make up about 80% of the audience. That's been a constant. So you can try to dodge around that, but all you got to do is walk in. Now, there's nothing. I think it's great those people are going to the theater, but where are the rest of the people is the point. And so my point has always been, it's taxpayers' money. I mean, we're all paying it. Why? So then the Republicans in their that conservative element in their disingenuous way they decide, yes, it's a wealth transfer from the poor to the wealthy to subsidize their culture, but they're the ones, the right, conservative right, they're the ones who are always been dead set on elevating a Western European canon. The Western European elite canon, because there is no, there are plenty of Western European art forms. Look at Ireland, for example, that are not for that narrow, wealthier demographic. So it's the elite Western canon they've always been set on. And so that continues today. And really, the point is that culture is always going to welcome contests, because culture is how we define reality. So there are going to always be contests about reality, about a master narrative, and then counter narratives. So it's part of the territory. And the sort of point I make, people often get confused about what is culture and what is art. And I always use the broad definition, the anthropological definition of culture, that it's our intellectual, it's our emotional, it's our spiritual, and it's our material traditions and features. So just think, you all in the seminar here, think, what else do you have but your spirit, your intellect, your emotions, and then your material traditions and features? I mean, that's who you are. So, and those things constitute reality. So they're going to be contests around those. And art is a fabricated expression of culture. Art is fabrication. It draws on emotion, spiritual, intellect, and sometimes material traditions to fashion something and to make a statement. So it's always going to be contested, and people who are in power absolutely understand the power of culture and the power of art. When a revolution happens, artists are often the very first that they try to get control of, because they're trying to control the narrative.
Right, and so by narrowing the audience to this upper 15% and telling the stories that they want to hear, you've essentially narrowed our narrative or of our spiritual and emotional and material life to those concerns for that particular group, right?
Exactly. And you can see how convenient that is.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from you is from your essay on art and democracy, where you said the assembled spectators for the typical not-for-profit professional theater production don't look like any community in the U.S. except perhaps a gated one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so to the point. So that really informs a lot of what you and Roadside seem to do, right? I mean, you're very much about access. In the essay that we read of yours, there was sort of a truncated version of a longer story that I had read where you talked about the tour that you did and went to Alabama, I think it was, where you had a great audience, but then you weren't invited back because they didn't like the way that you talked. And you, in the longer version, I think you get a little bit more explicit about why you think you were not invited back as far as the makeup of the audience who came to see you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess the one thing everyone should understand is the reason we were set on an inclusive audience that looks like the whole community is, well, we have that audience here in where we live in Central Appalachia, because it's, we're celebrating, or at least I don't know if you can celebrate it, but we're at least acknowledging that this is the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty. And on April 24th, 50 years ago, Lyndon Johnson, on the front porch of the Fletcher family in eastern Kentucky, declared the war on poverty. Well, of course, he wanted to show the white face of poverty to avoid the stereotype. So that's why he was here. And the majority of people who were poor then, and numerically as well as now, are white. So, that was some of his point. Well, here we are, and our audience is poor people, working class people, and middle class people. That's who's here. There are no really wealthy people here, maybe a few doctors and lawyers, but even they aren't that wealthy because the economy doesn't afford it. And so, that's who the ensemble is. Those are the families the Roadside Theater members come out of. So that's where the plays come. So it's just natural that you want to have the people whose stories you're telling present, whether it's in Alabama or somewhere else. So that's why we were always very interested in finding the full audience, because every town, Asheville, every town has got a real diverse audience, and we just wanted everybody there because it makes the plays go better. It just makes for a much fuller. So anyway, we set about this in our national touring. We tour a lot, and particularly back then. I mean, by now we've been in 43 states, but been in thousands of communities. Anyway, we found that the narrow elite audience was actually able to change the meaning of the plays. So those of you who are actors, performers, know, and particularly in our theater, we open ourselves to the audience, and the audience helps move the plays in certain directions. So by laughing at some things and paying attention to other things, not paying attention to other things that we thought were funny, well, the actors gradually began reshaping the scripts. Anyway, we needed everybody there for the plays to have their full meaning. Often, working class and middle class and poor people understood the plays better than the narrow audience, simply because it was closer to their experience. So anyway, we went through a whole lot of strategizing of how to get the entire community. And as Scott said, one of our earlier successes was Alabama. They'd never had so many people there. It was a full cross-section of the community. And just like you would think, the working class and middle class and the poor people got all the play. They got it quicker they got it intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally quicker than the elite audience. So they ended up, it flipped their little society upside down. They ended up actually leading the community leaders through the play. Well, this we thought it was a great success because a huge crowd, everybody had an uproarious time. So when we called back sometime later to say, well, I know you must want us again because you had such a huge crowd, great for the box office, etc. Anyway, after 2 or 3 calls, we finally just said, you're not going to invite us back. Why is that? And they said, well, as Scott just mentioned, they said, well, some of the board members didn't like the way y'all talked. Now, if you know how they talk in Alabama, that's quite a proposition. So, so we said, really, can you tell us a little more? And the guy said, well, I'll put it to you this way. One of the board members said, if we let this continue, the next thing we know, the people will want us to book country music, and we can't have that. So it just, they just wanted it to be their country club, their little art series to be their country club. Now, the paradox is it's public money. it's taxpayers' money. Everybody was paying for it. It was public money in a public space. It wasn't a country club. So that's the problem with it. The entire community was subsidizing something for a very few. And the very few were making the rest of the community think they were stupid because they couldn't possibly understand or enjoy the special thing that they were subsidizing. So you're getting screwed.
Yeah. So another really important aspect of Roadside Theater involves your partnerships and the way that you use partnerships to kind of make connections between different cultures. So you have some examples of that on your website. When I was visiting you this summer, someone who was from the Zuni tribe that you've been working with for several decades, right? Was there?
Yeah, 30-some years.
Yeah. So what does that add, and why do you feel that that's important to Roadside?
Well, Roadside began really telling this Appalachian story. So after what we did after that play Red Fox Second Hanging, we made a series of plays. We make all original work. We made a series of plays that began with the European incursion when white people came to these mountains, and they went through the Vietnam War. So this series of plays retold the region's history from a people's point of view, because the official history that was out there was the history of the corporations, the coal companies, which went from national to international. And like I noted earlier, people who understand power understand the power of art and the power of the story that a people tell themselves, and they want to control that story. So we were telling a counter story, a counter narrative through this series of plays. And one of the things we were testing from our beginning was whether telling a story that was very specific to a very particular place could reach people anywhere. So the idea was, can the specific, if rendered imaginatively and authentically, could that appeal to people in other parts of the U.S. and the world? Because we have traveled outside the U.S. And so we answered that question. The answer was affirmative. Yes, you can be very particular about local life if it's authentic and imaginative, and it will connect with people anywhere. And the Red Fox story connected with people in New York. The reason we went to New York is a little sidelight. The reason we went to New York was because we couldn't get money from the state of Kentucky. The Arts Council in Kentucky said there's no way that a professional theater could exist in Eastern Kentucky. The people are too ignorant over there. They haven't been to arts training school, and it's just impossible. And so, of course, we're not going to even look at what you've done, much less give you any money. Well, that made me mad, and so I thought maybe the quickest way to the Kentucky state capital, Frankfort, was through New York City. So we went up to New York City, and the play was a big hit, first down in the West Village and then up at the Manhattan Theater Club. And suddenly the New York Times was covering it, and the Louisville Courier Journal was covering it. And so then the Arts Council said, good Lord, what in the world's going on up there in New York? We better send people up there to find out. So they came up and, they got on the trend, and we got money. So anyway, the sort of point is that once we had sort of told our story here in this historical arc, we wanted to connect with the stories of others who were working similarly out of their own local history, out of their own local spiritual traditions, out of local life, and who were concerned about this idea of local life becoming aware of itself. I mean, things have gotten so generic, so homogenous, and so we were always local life becoming aware of itself and all of its complexity. So that's why we started connecting with others. And we were also searching for part of the new American story was telling our own story from a people's point of view. Another part of the American story, of the new American story, is the way the Appalachian story relates to, interfaces with, disagrees with the Native American story in Pueblo Zuni, the African American story with our partners in New Orleans, Junebug Productions, our Latino collaborators for now 20-some years in the Bronx, New York, Pregones Theater. So it's all about this American story and what comprises the American story, which is sort of a brilliant announcement I think Todd makes in his book in the section that that Roadside's part of. You know, he has two questions. What is America? I mean, that question is as relevant for us right now on this Skype situation as any question I can think of. And then, you know, then more particularly, what is an American theater? Well, this is something that, you know, that we have to be in the process of making an American theater. It's not something that has already been bottled and we can just buy it. We have to make it. You know, you all in the seminar, you know, if you stay in theater, that's a good question to keep before you. You know, what is the American theater that I want to make? And how does that connect to the future of America?
I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up to the students, so get ready with that. So this is going to be a question that is sort of going to invite hubris. I mean, it's sort of an invitation to not have humility at all. But why should Roadside be a model for an ideal theater in America? What could we take from what you have learned and have been doing and sort of move to scale throughout the United States?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's nothing that we've done that you can Xerox and then take home, and there it is. So we're very much in the process right now with our new website of trying to articulate exactly what we have done, not only why. We've done okay about why. I mean, you hear a lot of our big mouth about why we do something, what values and principles, but we're trying to explain in much more detail how we've done it. And what we are attempting to do is leave footprints so that you all in this seminar can learn from what we've done, but it is also to acknowledge that you will have to reinvent and reimagine what we have done. So the circumstances have changed. You're going to have a much harder time starting a theater like Roadside. There's less money. There are more obstacles in your way than I had when I was starting. So we're trying to leave these footprints, and from a kind of detailed footprint, hoping that there will be enough information there, enough guidance there, so that you can reinvent for your own purposes, within your own circumstances, for your own historical moment, what you want to do. So I'm right now working on for example, two book chapters that will both be published in 2015. One looks at our whole community cultural development methodology in some detail, in more detail than we've ever written about it before. And the other looks at the political aspects of the theater we've done. So, we're just trying to leave some lessons and some learning. And that's our approach to roadside living on. What so often happens is, you have founders who then their disciples take up the theater, and it just gets more and more watered down. So we're really not interested in passing on to anyone how we did it. We're interested in passing on to everyone how enough information so that they can reinvent it, can make it new. So that's really what we're hoping to do, and that's why we're doing the conversations like this. So hoping that you all will, if you see something useful, that there'll be enough there for you to do something with it, because you're going to have to make it up. This is a time for a moment of invention. I think, Scott, you argue for that all the time in your writing. That the old paradigm, you can go into the regional theater and stand in line, and it's like auditioning for the National Basketball Association or something. They're going to pick one out of 100,000, but that's not very viable. I think something completely new needs to be made, and it's going to have to be made by you all sitting in the seminar and your peers.
I'm going to open it up to the people sitting in the seminar. But he mentioned something, by the way, that I meant to mention at the beginning. This conversation is being saved and also is going to be posted on the Roadside Theater website for further discussion amongst the world. So there you are. Not to put any pressure on you, but do you have any questions or comments or anything you want to ask or say to Dudley? Go to Alwyn.
This might be kind of a big question, but are there any unique issues or communities you haven't gotten the chance to visit yet that you're interested in exploring more?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Right now, we've been doing a lot of work, as Scott knows, around incarceration, which is really a concept of nation inside. We have so many people in prison. So for about 10 years, we've been working on that issue. And I could come to UNC Asheville, and we could do a reading of the play with a class of, say, 30 people, the play that Scott produced there. We could do a reading of it at any preparation and then go into story circles, and there wouldn't be a student more than a couple of degrees of separation from the prison story. I know this to be the fact because I was just in last year in Salt Lake City, totally white audience, and it was the case there as well. So again, it's sometimes there are huge incarceration rates among Native Americans, the highest, African Americans, and then on. But anyway, so we're just now I'm working with, I just came back from Philadelphia Sunday, where I've been working with refugee Liberian artists. And their performance Sunday at a Liberian church was around domestic violence. So on Valentine's Day, there's a global moment called A Billion Rising that is around women domestic violence. And so we've done work on that before, and we'll be blogging and connecting that. We've worked in a number of other communities, Native American, so forth and so on, Latino, African American, and I'm sure there are a lot of rural communities. We've worked with church communities. So there's not really a community I could say right now that we have out there that we really want to work with. And part of that is because we wait to be invited. We don't really go out and try to market ourselves or sell ourselves to communities as if we have some answer. Of course, we're very active here in our own community, but that's among our own. So beyond our own community, which is parts of 5 states, we wait for an invitation. So I guess the most surprising thing in some ways that we've done in the last few years is we started working with reenactors. You know, reenactors, these, yeah. In this case, it's on the Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail. So, here they're, making their own clothes, growing their own flax and this, that. And they were, when we started working with them, it was all the white Daniel Boone coonskin flintlock group. So what we did was help work the script with them. And we brought in friends we had from Cherokee and brought in the Native American story. And then we brought in the African story. So that was all the story of the Wilderness Trail, which is right here where I am, the Daniel Boone Wilderness Trail. So we just brought those elements in. And of course, everybody liked it a lot more because it was more authentic. So there was no we don't want those Indians here, or we don't want these black people here. It was like, yeah, we want them here. Now we're getting the whole story. So everybody got pumped. A funny little thing happened the first year. We had the big highlight of the day-long siege at the blockhouse was when the Cherokee were going to raid the blockhouse. Well, that was scheduled for 2:00. And the Cherokee went up an hour or two before the scheduled 2:00 raid up into the woods, sort of prepare their strategy. Anyway, they got all excited and they raided early, and it was a sneak raid, and it caught everybody by surprise. And of course, the audience that arrived at 2 had missed it. So anyway, that's. Those, you just should not, there's no reason to be snobby. I mean, these reenactors, I guarantee you their costumes beat anything on Broadway.
Someone else? Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about the relation between power play and controlling art in order to control the narrative of the culture. But to sort of connect it to something we've been talking about in class a lot, which is the idea of the theater formal education that exists now, and how we can sort of use that to our advantage in expanding theater. Do you think that, coming from your background without necessarily going through the formal education in drama, do you think having more of a knowledge about politics and social justice is more of an advantage in theater than actual technical knowledge?
Yeah, I would say this, that it's very important to have opportunities to develop your values and principles, and that the technical knowledge, if it doesn't have some bigger purpose to serve, I think you'll find it kind of stillborn. So I think technical knowledge is important. I mean, knowing how to write and to act and how to block things and, lighting and design. I think all those things can be important, but sometimes it seems like they become all important. And we don't teach in school enough of the other parts that I think will make for a successful theater career in the 21st century, which includes an understanding of culture policy, because you're going to be in the midst of culture policy, so you need to understand the history of it. And then Scott, when he produced the Thousand Kites play, he did what we would do if we had been teaching, which was not just produce the play in the theater, but to have the performers and the people working on the play actually connect with the first voices of people who knew about the prison system, whether they were guards or whether they were formerly incarcerated or the loved ones of either. I mean, that's what we made the play from those what we call first voices. And the first voice principle is an important one to us. It's just that people can speak for themselves about their own experiences. And so Roadside's different than a number of other theaters in that when we're working with first voice, like Anna DeVere Smith, she would probably get the first voice, but then she would perform it. For Roadside, we often like to have the people who actually have had the experience get up on the stage and be the performers. So anyway, I wouldn't say it's an either or, but I would say that you really need to balance the technical, and typically now it is overbalanced. And of course it's overbalanced if you're already in the master narrative. The question about what is America and what is an American theater is a question that the master narrative has already settled. So they don't want to open up that question again. They just want you to be an instrument in acting that master narrative. Well, the master narrative doesn't include people here in an equitable way in Central Appalachia. So the master narrative doesn't serve us. So we have to ask these bigger questions. And I would just say that we all do at this point, because the U.S. is not headed in a sustainable direction. I don't care if you're in a gated community or not.
That was a great answer, Dudley. I think I'm gonna take that segment out and tour with it for a while. Me and you. Who else has something for Rosemary?
This is still sort of related to your political activism as a background. How did that affect what plays you chose? Because I know you helped write the first one, and how did that impact what you brought to each place that you went? Because obviously every community is different, their political affinities, their political issues are different, and also based on the demographic of your audience, who's even going, since we know it is traditionally upper class white people who might not be having the same issues that you might be bringing to the table.
Well, you just laid out what a lot of the dilemma that we faced. Of course, we are making the plays ourselves out of an ensemble, a very tight-knit ensemble, people working together decade after decade. And we're retelling the story first of here. And we're retelling it from a people's point of view. So we're spending a lot of time with oral histories and so forth as we make our plays to catch the voices of the people. So when we carried those plays to other places, that was one of the things we were testing that I mentioned early. Can the local and the specific, if done in an imaginative, authentic way, can it appeal to people elsewhere? So I'll give you an example. One of the plays we made in this series of historical plays about our area is called South of the Mountain. It's a musical, or it has a lot of music in it, a lot of original music. Most all our plays have music, original music. So this is the story about a family at the moment when that family changes its way of living, what we would today call lifestyle, from hillside farming to jobs for pay in the coal mines, when they trade a kind of independence on the farm for the company store. So it's a musical. It's got a lot of, so, you know, it's a political play in the sense that politics and policy are subtext in it, but it's not a play that's political in the sense that it's saying, okay, I mean, we watch a family, what they go through. That's the drama. And it's up to the audience really to decide what that means for their own lives, for their own sense of themselves, their community, their politics. So we were performing the play in Sweden. And we thought, my goodness, how in the world are these folks in Sweden going to relate to this play? Well, the reviews came out and they absolutely got it, because in some ways it was an archetypal story about this moment when a family makes a transition from one economy to another. So we've just found that our work can translate. But another point is that to reach, say, an African American community in the South, we thought, well, we could do that much better if we collaborated with African American theater. Because, you know, again, back to this idea of first voice. So one of the plays we made with Junebug Productions was called Junebug Jack. And it looked at the history of poor and working class white relationships from the founding of the country, when slaves were brought in, when Scots-Irish most typically came in as indentured servants, a little told aspect of our early history, through the Vietnam War. So again, it was a musical. So the sort of point of that play was, okay, and it took some doing to make it, because the two companies had very different experiences, and there is white privilege, and even though we are working class and poor and middle class white here, there is still a privilege, particularly if one wants to assume that privilege. So anyway, there was much to negotiate and discuss and so forth in making the play. And of course, because it's drama, the tensions of making the work, actually, you know, conflict is a big part of drama. So the conflicts we were having making the play can serve the script itself. Anyway, the sort of point is that once we would perform the play, then we would invite the audience that same evening or the next day to join us in story circles and to tell their own story about race and class in their own community. And the stories, without fail, were so powerful because the play gave a framing and a frankness to the issue, gave a kind of permission to the community to tell stories they'd never told each other before across racial and class lines. And so those story circles became really a whole new act of the play, and were very powerful as anything that we had in the play. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's very reaffirming when you have those experiences, because it's reaffirming because you see people struggling to understand and make sense out of their lives. And so a lot of what we've been trying to do is take that somewhat nascent sense of struggle that we all have in our own lives, and how can we have critical discourse around it? How can it lead to solidarity? How can it lead to the kind of change that gives all of us more justice? So there's a whole method we use, and that gives you a sense of it, and how something can become very particular and local with our method.
Katie?
Mm-hmm. I looked around the Roadside website a bit before, and I want to say I really like it. I was impressed with the layout and the amount of content there was compared to other theater websites. Usually you just get some information about shows and stuff, but this was great because I found the CD that you had on there of recordings from some of the musical shows, and that was one of my first thoughts when you were telling an Appalachian narrative was folk music, because that's like a more well-established like part of our heritage, I guess. And I thought that was really great that you had it on there, and that you continue to make musical shows is really great. Shows that music doesn't have to be a part of an elite theater, or I mean more like a New York style production. And I wanted to ask what some of the challenges of directing amateurs, or when they first are amateurs, has been. Like, what is it? Are there any specific things you could advise of if we go into communities ourselves? What are some challenges compared to people who like know the etiquette of theater? I mean, whether we think etiquette of theater is relevant or not. That's the question.
I get you. No, I really get you. Well, I did have done a lot of the directing of Roadside. So I've been mainly working as a writer, dramaturg, and director, not performing. And the advantage I had of directing amateurs was that I was an amateur myself. So it was, we were figuring it out together. And by amateur, what I would say is the Roadside Company were, when we were most green, when we were just getting started, they were folk artists. So in fact, they were highly trained. They were very trained musicians, singers, storytellers. They'd grown up in the churches here, so they understood drama. It was just a different kind of training. It was a community training, and they had started training very young. They were raised in these traditions. So in fact, they had, as they say, a lot of chops, a lot of expertise. Now, there are, different design principles and just different staging principles and so forth that we had to learn. And that was fine. We learned as we went, and we learned from others. So I would, when we went to New York, I learned from a very experienced director there. I sort of apprenticed to that director. Sort of learned as we went. And so that's how we developed our craft. But we had a strong basis. So I guess my point is that when you're in a community with so-called amateurs, they probably are not, they may be amateurs around, like you say, the certain protocols of theater, but they are not amateurs when it comes to their own story and their own, perhaps, experience with drama, whether, whatever that experience would be. So when I'm working with community members on directing community members in a performance, I begin always with they're sticking close to what they know. So it begins with them telling their own story, or maybe someone will trade stories, but a community story that they're familiar with. So in other words, we build out from a base of knowledge, and not skip over that to and they're creating the scripts themselves, so that's very helpful. So yes, you'll be in communities and someone will say, well, which way is stage right? But those are just really minor things. And what you want to be focusing on is the depth of the story, the intelligence, the emotion, the spirit of the story. And, you'll find that in every community. Let me give you an example. When we couldn't figure out how to when we were touring that show we made with the African American company, Junebug Jack, and we couldn't figure out how to get working class, poor, black and white people together to see the show. I mean, because they don't go to theater and they don't go out together in the South, so as a rule. So what we did was we created community choirs, ecumenical community choirs. So 2 people for 3 people from the white choir, in the white choir, 2 or 3 from the black, some from the women, a real mix. And they made a new community choir, a new ecumenical community choir. And then they received the music, which was, of course, all charted, and rehearsed it for a couple of months. Then I would come in and direct them into the play. Well, of course, then the whole community turned out, because all the churches came to see what their people were doing. Now, the marvelous thing about that experience is that all those people who came across lines of race and class, they, because their own tradition, singing tradition in this case, was so respected and so well represented on the stage, they immediately got interested in the other traditions. They didn't have to fight for their own. It was there beautifully exhibited. So they got really fascinated by the other traditions. Now, the people who joined the choirs, this ecumenical choir, they didn't do that to discuss race and class. They did it because they saw it as a great performance opportunity. Here comes this national tour to their community. It's going to have full design, lighting, et cetera, et cetera. And they thought it was a good chance to shine. And then in the process of rehearsal, then all these relationships are built, and real issues are discussed, because that's in the music of the play and also in the book.
We only have a few minutes left, and so I want to ask Dudley whether there's anything that I should have asked, or something that you would like to say to the students that we didn't manage to get to through this discussion.
Well, the main thing that I'm sure you all are discussing, and it's very interesting to me just how you all are thinking about your careers. I mean, as a psychology major, there's a lot of opportunity to use performance in theater. I think theater is going to be, the opportunity for theater to be used in multiple ways rather than just on the, quote, main stage, will become increasingly apparent. So I'm just very interested, of course, in you all and how you are going to reinvent, reimagine the American theater, if that's what you stick with. I mean, so that's why we're doing the website, because we really want to support you, because you're the next iteration of this work. So I just hope you're getting the information and the help you need. Just knowing that you're going to have to be bold and completely figure it out in a new way.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. It's always great to talk to you, Dudley. I find it so inspiring, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day after you've been traveling to spend this time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.